Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 120 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Gavin. That is Mike and Fia, and it's been, I think, for all of us, kind of a weird couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We all have a bunch of life stuff going on. Mike is now back working. Teachers, those slackers, getting the whole summer off. But now he's back to working.
Yeah, but
Working is a way to put it. I mean, those first couple of days, how much work am I actually doing?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you could not tell, dear listeners, that was a joke.
yes.
Way to ruin the joke, Kevin.
But yeah, so lots of life stuff going on. This being an episode that ends in a 0 or a 5 is not one of my episodes, but is one of our wonderful other co-hosts. But I think technically it was supposed to be Fia's episode, but Fia, as we mentioned, has a lot of life stuff going on. So Mike has graciously offered to take this one off of her hands.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, no worries. I decided what we're doing about an hour and a half ago.
Woo!
Which is
Nice.
more time actually than that's more leeway than I've given myself before on a Mike Takes a Wheel. So.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's see. Fia, while I'm trying to look for this piece of news that I'm trying to do you want to do some quick housekeeping?
Yes, I got you. I'll do that, and I'll do some Swamp Corner.
Wonderful.
So, don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and give us feedback about the show and any future topics you would like to hear about on the podcast. And also, if you would like to be a guest on the show, be sure to fill out our guest form. All those can be found in the show notes. Gavin, do you have any idea about what next episode topic is going to be?
Sure don't. Although I believe
real bang up operation we've got here today, boys.
Yeah, no, this is very thrown together.
We're here.
It's going to be something human adjacent, I will say. Human, like apes and or human evolution. But don't hold me to that. That's just quick off the dome.
Do we ever hold you to it?
No. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a pretty chill podcast. Anyway, for Swamp Corner today, I have an interesting animal called the nutria, which is a rodent, Myocastor coipus. It is a large herbivorous semi-aquatic rodent native to the subtropical and temperate parts of South America. And these big rats, basically, they burrow near water and then feed on river or estuary plant systems. However, they were introduced in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, mainly by fur farmers, but I would assume probably from other ways as well. And now they are a very invasive species, particularly in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So these things kind of look like beavers, but without the tail. Like they just look like giant rats, but they have these bright orange like beaver teeth, and they can severely damage the coastal marshes by decimating native plants that hold the marsh soils together, and so that support the survival of the native wildlife. And so they're basically kind of mucking up and messing with the land, and they can also carry tapeworms that can get into the water and contaminate swimming areas and drinking water supplies. And so they're pretty bad, and they're a pretty big problem in Louisiana. So they started offering a bounty for every nutria killed. And currently the bounty is $6 a nutria, where you can kill it. I think you just have to return the tail, and you can keep the rest. I think some people actually will eat the meat because they're pretty big.
Yeah, they're, like you said, they're not quite as big as like a beaver, but closer.
Well, some of them,
I'd say marginal, give or take the size of like a small raccoon.
Yeah. Okay. Honestly, I would just say a raccoon. The ones here
Yeah.
are pretty big. The ones I see like on the side of the road, anyway.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
but I'm
no,
sure everywhere else not as big.
yeah. I remember when I was in community college, I took a vertebrate biology class, which was mostly meant for like our community college's zookeeper program. So it was based a lot on like obviously we learned about vertebrates in general, but it was focused a lot on like common zoo animals and also sort of our local wildlife because we worked with like our local zoo in Watertown that was had a lot of local wildlife, and so we talked about nutria a decent amount because while they're not super common in like northern New York, they are there. Um,
Really?
and funnily enough, the our teacher showed us a beaver skull and a nutria skull, and like you said, they have that like bright orange on their front teeth because they actually have iron in their teeth, which is real weird.
Hmm.
That's pretty
um,
metal. Like no pun intended.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, they're red like that because they have like iron, which is oxidized and turns kind of like a rusty color. But basically the only difference between a beaver skull and a nutria skull is that nutria have like a little hole in like their palate, so like the roof of their mouth.
Hmm.
And that's literally the only difference. Like the size is like more or less interchangeable. They both have the red teeth. um so yeah, it's they're beaver size and real beaver like, just not as aquatic as beavers.
Yeah, and they don't have like the thick beaver tail.
Yeah, but neat. I like nutria. They're always like the weird little cousin of the beaver, and not as popular because they're not. I don't know. Canada doesn't seem to like them as much, I guess.
Yeah. But
Cool.
anyway, did you find a little fun fact for us?
I did. It's actually a little piece of news that's been going on. I try to find like a good article. If I find like a good like not paywalled article, I'll put it down in the show notes. But um, something that's been making the rounds in the paleontology circle in the last like day or so is so the South African space. I get well. It's one of the actually I thought it was a South African space program, but it's one of the like weird uh like companies that's doing space travel. I think it's Virgin Galactic. Um, but there's a prominent South African um, astronaut who brought some human ancestor fossils on the most recent uh, space flight, if you can call what Virgin Galactic does space flight.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they shot some fossils into space, specifically of Australopithecus sediba, which is sort of the closest species to the genus Homo. It's thought that the genus Homo came from this species, as well as the species Homo naledi, which is what I believe the earliest species of the genus Homo. So these are like really important species in human evolution, and this is why potentially we're going to be talking about humans and human evolution next week, or next episode. But yeah, so it's been kind of making the rounds in the paleontology space as to like why
Yeah, why?
why do this? Especially because the first time that I read something about it, um, this wasn't like somebody's like take on Twitter. This was like from an article that said like the two fossils. I think it was like a thumb bone and some other bone. So not like whole skeletons or like a skull or anything, but um, they were carried by astronaut Timothy Nash, who is South African. Um, and what I read was that they were in his pocket, and I'm like, it's probably not the best place for him.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably not.
Jeez.
so I've since like seen some pictures, and they're like in cases with like a South African flag and stuff because both of those species are known from South Africa. So it's like I kind of get it, but at the same time, I'm like, don't why do this?
Hmm. Yeah,
But anyway,
that's the
like I said,
news.
yeah, that's the news. If I
And that's
like I
the
said, if
way
I
it
find a
is.
good article, it'll be in the show notes. But space. Anyway, what do you got for us, Mike?
So, uh, how do I want to put this? How do I want to begin this? Death. So,
Yeah.
uh, people die. That's kind of the part of what's going on with the show. Just things die in general.
Sure.
And there were a lot of people that died. There's a lot of people that die every day. And on November 22nd, 1963, I'm sure a lot of people died. Most of whom we don't care about. We don't know much about. They were people that died. But there was famous people that also died on that day. Do any of you guys know the famous person that died on November 22nd, 1963?
1960. Oh, it's JFK.
Yes. Now here's the thing.
Nice.
Thank you.
JFK. Yeah. Now here's the thing.
Well, not nice that he died, but
Wow.
good guess.
When we're talking about JFK and the JFK assassination, there's more to the story there when we're talking about death, because JFK was not the only person that died that day. He was not even the only person that got shot that day. And so, just very briefly in today's episode, I want to talk about the two other people that got shot, one of whom survived and one of whom did not, as part of the JFK assassination. And so, we are going to begin with actually in the car with JFK. JFK is riding around in that famous motorcade in Dallas, Texas, when he is struck by a bullet. There's a first shot that misses, and there's a second shot that hits JFK in the
that
throat.
famously curves to hit JFK.
Yes, of course. This is, if you've ever heard of something called the magic bullet theory, this is kind of what we're talking about here. And what happened is that shot went through JFK, hit him in the throat. This is before the one that hits him in the head and mortally wounds him, for sure, but hits him in the throat. And then it hits somebody else. Do either one of you two know anyone else that was in the car with JFK that day?
I think his wife, right?
His wife was in the car, Jackie Kennedy. She was not shot.
Right.
Do you know who else was in the car?
I don't.
I don't know.
Man by the name of John Connally, who was governor of Texas at that point. John Connally was a conservative Democrat, governor of Texas. He served as, I believe, Secretary of the Navy under Kennedy, and then ran for and won the governorship in Texas. And he's sitting in that car. And he heard a shot ring out, and he tried to turn around and see the president, and then he felt something hit him in the back. And he said, once he felt that, he said, "Oh God, my God, they're going to kill us all." He knew immediately this was some sort of assassin that was trying to bring down, in his mind, everybody there. You have the governor there, you have the president there, and I am trying to find the actual injuries here. Connally suffered. Again, we know what happened to JFK. He winds up dying. Connally suffers a fracture of the fifth rib, a punctured lung, a shattered wrist, and a bullet lodged in his leg. He undergoes surgery for 4 hours and winds up recovering from those wounds, and continues serving as governor of Texas. And him recovering from this injury gives him almost immortal status in the state of Texas.
I was going to say, I bet this man never lost another election.
He never lost another election, certainly not for governor of Texas. He runs for re-election at that time. The governorship, or the governor of Texas, ran for re-election every 2 years, and he won by incredibly wide margins when he was running. He was also reasonably popular in Texas at that time, but this kind of did it for him.
Wait, every 2 years?
Every 2 years, yeah. It was
that must
every 4
be
years.
Exhausting.
I can only imagine, which is why now I believe they have changed that to every 4 years. In Texas, but yeah, I was going to say getting reelected, like running for anything, even for the first time, sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
But just the idea of running for reelection every 2 years is pretty exhausting. Getting shot seems to help, but I bet if you would ask John Connally, he would prefer not to get shot. Eventually, in 1971, Republican President Richard Nixon appointed this conservative Democrat, John Connally, as Secretary of the Treasury. And he was in charge of basically weaning the U.S. off of the gold standard, what is known as the Nixon shock. John Connally served a pretty important role in that. He winds up leaving that position, I believe, in 1971 or so, or 1972, to head up the Democrats for Nixon campaign. Richard Nixon's
What?
running for re-election. John Connally is saying, "Hey, we're Democrats for Nixon because I'm a Democrat." At this point, he was functionally a Democrat in name only.
Right.
Um, he winds up switching parties shortly thereafter. And when Spiro Agnew resigns, a lot of people don't know that Richard Nixon had a vice president before Gerald Ford. Spiro
And
Agnew
also that
resigns.
his name was Spiro Agnew.
Yes,
That is the
that was
most
it.
made up name I've ever heard in my life.
And he was
Yeah.
vice president of the United States. When that happened, John Connally was on the short list of candidates to actually become vice president. He very nearly became VP. And that job wound up obviously going to Gerald Ford. And in that point, John Connally's career was mostly over. He tries to run for president in 1980, and that goes virtually nowhere. And it has been said by other people. I'm trying to find the exact quote, and I can't see it here. But that getting shot by Lee Harvey Oswald was one of the best things that ever happened to John Connally, because he would be forever etched in history next to
Yeah.
JFK. It gave him that kind of prominence, and he was able to have still a rather long and successful career in American politics thereafter. So that's the first guy that also
Yeah.
got shot in addition to President Kennedy. There is a second person that was shot about 45 minutes later. Now, I mentioned his name, but once again, do either of you two know who killed President Kennedy on that day in November?
Ted Cruz's dad slash S. Not actually Ted Cruz's dad.
Of course.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot him from the 7th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. He winds up fleeing the Texas School Book Depository and is kind of wandering around the streets of Dallas. And at one point, he comes across a police officer by the name of J.D. Tibbet. And according to Wikipedia here, J.D. Tibbet's first and middle name was just J.D. Like, they didn't stand for anything.
What?
Yeah, which I
Was
always...
it J-A-Y?
Was it? No, like J, like the letter J,
Just
period, the
the
letter
letter
D,
J.
period.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Apparently there are some sources that say it's supposed to stand for Jefferson Davis, and those are incorrect, is what is said here. Regardless, we're talking about a man named J.D. here, and I love that.
Right.
So about 15 minutes after the Kennedy assassination, Tibbet received this radio order to drive over to the Central Oak Cliff area to try and help construct a perimeter and help find whoever just shot the president. You can imagine the mass chaos that is happening around this time. And at around 1:10, 1:11 or so, Tibbet was driving slowly when he pulled alongside a man who resembled the description given to police of a white man, about 5'9", and slender. That man was Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald walked over to JD's car and exchanged words with him through the window. And we don't know exactly what was said, because shortly thereafter, Lee Harvey Oswald shoots Tibbet 5 times. One of the bullets misses. 3 of the bullets hit him in the chest, and 1 hit him in the right temple. And Tibbet died shortly thereafter and was pronounced dead at 1:25 at the hospital. And that was originally when Lee Harvey Oswald. This was seen by a number of other people. The actual JFK assassination. Very few people had a good look at what happened, and virtually nobody actually saw Oswald shoot Kennedy. There were a number of witnesses to this murder here, the murder of J.D. Tibbet. And as a result, this is what Oswald is originally arrested for. He ducks into a theater without paying. A couple of people see him. They tip off police. And the police go and arrest Oswald for the murder of this police officer. And it is only shortly thereafter that he is then arrested for the murder of JFK. And that is obviously a sad place to end. But I wanted to give just some voice and some credence to the other people that were shot that day, November 22nd, 1963, besides just President Kennedy, because they don't get talked about a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other person who lived until 2014, who was wounded from injuries from like pieces of concrete, going up and striking them, I believe, in the cheek. That person was obviously just fine, considering, once again, they lived until 2014.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is just some more context around the John F. Kennedy assassination that I think a lot of just casual American citizens probably aren't aware of.
Right. I want to
Yeah.
know. I'm so curious about what their conversation was now.
I would love to know how that went. Was it like, hey, we're looking for a guy that looks like you? Was it, were they talking about, oh my God, can you believe the president was killed? Yeah, like I can't, like,
Yeah.
that's
How'd it go
one,
down?
one of those pieces that's obviously lost to history. But I would
Yeah.
love to know exactly what was said.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a short one, but this was episode 120 of I Wish You Were Dead, the podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike. That was Gavin and Fia, and Gavin will have us all set next week with another episode. But until then, take care, everybody.
Well, I'll do my best anyway.
Maybe 2 weeks from now instead of next week, but still.
This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Mike Bryson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Fenella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.